As she said, I'm Donna Woudenberg. I work currently half-time for the Joslin Institute for Sustainable Communities, so I can balance, again, the second shift kind of thing, so I can balance also doing some lecturing for the university when I can, and also taking care of my family. My family is a little bit high maintenance, so so it takes some of my time. Yes, that's very true. Can I just do that? Okay. So we talked a little bit, or some of the people who have already talked this morning talked about a little bit of who they are, what influenced their decisions to do the things that they did. Can you see it anywhere? Oh, okay. Oh, there it is. Okay. I'll just keep jiggling if I can. So I was going to do the same thing, share a little bit about who I am and what my influences were that led me to science and environmental issues and also women's issues. So I grew up in the country in Maryland. I was out in the country in the woods. I played in the country all the time. Beautiful landscape. We were situated between the Appalachian Mountains and the Chesapeake Bay and then the Atlantic Ocean farther east. I was raised and influenced by some very strong women. Very strong, very good women. My grandmother, my mother's mother was a really strong influence on me. I was born in November, and that Christmas Eve, my father and godfather were in an automobile accident. Alcohol and speed were involved. They both went through the windshield. My dad's back was badly injured, so my mother, father, and I had to move in with my grandparents, my mother's parents. And at that time, my grandmother also had her mother living with her aging mother. She had her brother living with her who had had a stroke, and she had to take care of him. She took care of my grandfather, and then my father who was injured, and an infant. And that is how I spent the first 5 years of my life. And she did this selflessly. Her house was always tidy. She had a beautiful garden and chickens. We had fresh eggs. She made 3 meals a day. She ironed everything. You know, I don't know how she did it, but she did it. And she did it without complaint. And really, she is one of the most selfless women I've ever met in my whole life I've ever known. And she was a very strong influence on me. Also, my other grandmother, very strong Quaker woman. She was she and my other grandmother both ruled the roost in their own households, but they had different personalities. So my other grandmother believed in, equal rights, human rights. Women should be independent. Women should work. She was a postmistress in her town. She traveled extensively, and she introduced me to traveling by taking me downtown to D.C. She had season tickets to National Geographic lectures, and every month she would go downtown, take the bus downtown D.C. I would go with her as much as I could, watch those lectures, and I was just amazed by what was going on in the other parts of the world, because I really had a sheltered existence living in the, in the country out there. So my mom also took out, so it was kind of a combination of both of my grandmothers, a little more independent than her mother, but at the same time, family was first. You took care of the house, you took care of the family, ruled the roost. And now I'm the oldest of 4 girls. I have, out of my cousins, 7 of them were female, 3 were male, so basically lots of females to grow up with. Now I have 3 daughters. I have 4 granddaughters and 1 lone grandson, and I have 3 great-granddaughters, 2 of whom live with my husband and I right now because of medical reasons. So, been pretty much influenced and spent my life around lots and lots of females, and I see them as all strong, capable, intelligent, and wonderful people. So, we have to embrace our unique qualities, their unique qualities, their unique interests, encourage them. We were talking about encouraging other women earlier. That's what we have to do. That's important for all children, but particularly for girls. Okay, so other influences, I'm not going to read all of that. I grew up in the 60s, but you can see there were a lot of things going on around me. Even though I was in the country, I was close to the DC-Baltimore corridor, and all of these things were happening. These things, or different things, happen for every generation. This was my influence for my generation. So lots and lots going on, all of those things stuck in my mind. And some of these things made me think about, okay, here I am, this nice little, Catholic white girl out in the country, and all of these things were happening to other people, others. So there was kind of this feeling as I was growing up and kind of sheltered and isolated that these things happened to other people. I didn't have to worry about that quite so much, Then I got married. I graduated from high school and got married early, obviously. And I moved to Germany. My oldest daughter was born in Germany. The same thing someone said earlier, okay, I can just put her in a backpack and keep going, just go on with my life. It doesn't always work out that way, but we did travel when we were there, and gosh, what a culture difference. I could not believe how beautiful that landscape was. We traveled as much as we could on a PFC salary, and went to as many places as we could. Most of it was beautiful and impressive and ancient and glorious. But there were also some scary things there. Oh, and another thing, once I got to Germany, a lot of what was on the daily news in the United States kind of faded into the background. It's like they didn't really care as much about what was going on in the DC-Baltimore corridor as I was faced with every day. So I thought, okay, their culture is a little different. What they think about is a little different. What they do is a little different. That was part of the news, but they had their own news and their own issues to worry about. Okay, so the kind of the scary things that I saw there were, we visited Spain when Franco was in power. And I thought that I knew what poverty was by watching, looking at the slums in DC and Baltimore. I thought that was what poverty was. The poverty in Franco's Spain was appalling. In the larger cities, everything looked pretty nice, like in Madrid and Barcelona, but smaller towns, like we camped in a small town outside of Barcelona. When we were traveling, it was called Sitges, and the houses did not have doors or windows. They had curtains. They did not have plumbing. So, the children urinated and defecated in the street right in front of everybody else. It ran down the street, and I thought, okay, this is what poverty is like. And another level of poverty, and that really stuck with me. And another thing that was really apparent and shocking to me was reminders of World War II. So this was in the 70s, so it wasn't that far removed, just a generation removed from World War II, actually. My father's generation fought in World War II. So when I visited there, one of the things I did want to do is see a concentration camp. And I was so disturbed and so shaken by that I could hardly eat or sleep for about a week or so afterwards. So that was a real eye-opener for me, too, to be face-to-face with that kind of history. So it changed my worldview, and I started questioning a lot of assumptions about what I thought, was normal or right. Came back to the States. As I said, my oldest daughter was born there, second daughter born in the States. I got busy with family and raising children. All those things went around in my mind, however. And then after a while, we moved to Nebraska. I started back to school after my third daughter was born. So the January after I turned 40, I started back to school. I went to SCC. It took me 4.5 years. Working 50 hours a week and taking care of the children, raising the children, and going to school part-time to be able to graduate, but I thought I wanted to teach in public school. I changed my mind because I like science so much, transferred to UNL and started going to school full-time. I was in the environmental studies program. I love the sciences. I love the social sciences. And one of the big take-home messages I got from that degree is that everything is connected. Human rights and environmental rights are linked. Land, air, water, living things, it's all intimately connected. We can't separate ourselves from the environment. Master's was in climatology. I did a lot of science there. One of my big take-homes was the climate system, the very intimate workings of the climate system, and then accelerated climate change and how human activity has influenced that. Then I went on to a PhD program, which was a human dimensions program. It was new. It was a hybrid between physical social sciences. Felt like it was tailor-made for me. I got to take so many wonderful humanities and social science classes, and my realization there is the globe is shrinking, the environment and the climate are in trouble, and there are no others in this shrinking globe. We are all one race, the human race. We're all being impacted by environmental degradation and by climate change. And we have to, understand that. So my dissertation study was called Perception of the Drought Hazard on the Great Plains and Sociological Impacts. It was a longitudinal study. There was one study done in the 60s, another in the 80s, and then mine was in the 2000s, early 2000s. The first two studies were done by men, and they interviewed male primary producers, and that was, the extent of their study. The studies were still very, very good and very interesting, but I decided I wanted to talk to not just men, but men and women. So I tried to make it almost half and half. I sought out, purposely sought out female primary producers or spouses of producers, and made sure I could talk to them as well as, just the men on the farm. I also talked to community members because I wanted to see, okay, what if we're looking at sociological impacts, how is this impacting the community? What's going on there? So I talked to teachers and professors and school counselors. I talked to medical professionals, pastors, and priests. I included them because if anyone is having problems with depression or stress or whatever in that part of the state, people are more likely to keep it in. They don't want to hang on their dirty laundry and go to a counselor. Everybody thinks there's the stigma associated with going to a counselor, but they might confide in their priest or their pastor, and that was really eye-opening. Trucking companies, weed, seed, and feed, a feed lot, a vet, a crop duster, a grocer, machinery repair, a banker, and then extension agents, 2 extension agents. I got this plethora of information from all of them, but the eye-opening one was with the extension agents. I went into an office, and there were 2 extension agents, one male and one female. So I interviewed the male extension agent first, and he told me all the things that you would think would be associated with drought in farming, drought in agriculture, drought in ranching, mostly from a male perspective. And I asked him, had he noticed any sociological impacts, any community impacts? And he said, well, no, but maybe I'm the wrong person to ask about that. I just didn't notice that. So then I went out one door and literally into the next door the office of the female extension agent. I asked her the same question, and she said, oh my God, how much time do you have? And I thought, this is going to be good, So anyway, she and the other females that I talked to in the community said there was an increase in applications for free and reduced meals for children in schools. There was an increase in adults and children using Medicaid. There's drought-related depression in adults. The family stress is very noticeable in children in the school system. Some of them were frightened, some of them were sad. Kids in the technical college, some of them were reluctant to go back to the farm or the ranch after graduation because they had seen mom and dad, arguing at the table for maybe 5 years over the stress of trying to keep that farm or that ranch running under drought conditions. There was an increase in spouses having to take jobs off of the farm, and there was even drought-related divorce. So she saw all of these things. The other women saw all of these things. So it's not just, it's not just the crops are withering and you owe a lot of money. There are a lot of different things happening. So female perspectives can be very, very different from male perspectives. There was a lot more going on there than lost crops. And that was also, that was what was discussed in the 2 previous studies. But for me, the female perspective that provided the rest of the story. That was the rest of the story, like Paul Harvey always used to say. Okay, so men, women, and children in western Nebraska perceive and are impacted differently by drought. That was my big conclusion, and that was reflected also in literature from other countries. So a gendered perspective makes a difference on environmental issues. A cultural perspective makes a difference on environmental issues. So as far as gender, we're not talking about biological definition of sex. We're talking about social and cultural determination of behaviors, roles, responsibilities that are attributed to men and women. And also culture, attitudes, behaviors, knowledge, values, so on, that are created by a group of people and transmitted from one generation to the other. And that happens all across the United States. We have different cultures across the United States. We have different cultures all across the world, and we can't just think about, the United States, which is a developed country. We have to think about all cultures and how they approach the environment, how they interact with the environment, how they're impacted by the environment, what kind of environmental materials they use to carry out their roles. We have to think about all of those things. And also vulnerability is a big issue, especially with women, the children, the elderly, handicapped, minorities, the people in poverty. So the characteristics that we have, a person or a group, to anticipate, cope with, resist, and recover from natural hazard, that determines our vulnerability. So we have to make sure that when we're thinking about vulnerability, particularly, I think about climate change, especially now, that we take into account everyone, not just, the developed countries or the men at the table. So why does all of this matter? It matters because with food security, agriculture and food security, women make up 51% of the agricultural workforce globally, 7% in the U.S., and up to 90% in Southeast Asian rice production. Rural women in less developed countries produce between 60 and 80% of the food that their family eats. Staple foods, home gardens, critical for nutrition, is unpaid labor, is invisible, is low-tech, is small-scale normally. Men are more likely to do the work of large-scale cash cropping, especially if it's mechanized, and climate change is going to impact agriculture. It already is impacting agriculture, especially if it's rain-fed. So women are going to be differentially impacted by climate change, because if they're doing especially 90% of agriculture in Southeast Asia, they are really going to be impacted by the changes in the climate and what they can give their families, what they can feed their families. Traditionally, in the past, when aid groups have gone to these different countries. Oh my gosh, I've got to go back. Okay. Also, why does this matter? Water. Okay, in many cultures, women and girls are responsible for collecting water. They use this to carry out their roles. They use water to carry out their roles. They have to stand for long times to get water or walk long ways to get water. This is still a problem. It still happens. The women are most affected by water shortages because they're dependent on that to carry out their roles, and as the systems degrade, women become increasingly vulnerable, and climate change is also going to exacerbate that. Oh gosh, okay. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Anyway, when I did get my postdoc, I was fortunate enough to be able to do some teaching. All of that was running around in my head. I created a class called Gender and Cultural Perspectives on the Environment that kind of pulled all of that together. Really fun for me to develop. It is being taught with the Environmental Studies program. They did change the name, however. School of Natural, or College of Agricultural and Natural Resources did not want it to say Gender and Cultural Perspectives on the Environment, so the name has been changed to Individual and Cultural Perspectives on the Environment, but that's okay. The basis is still the same. I also teach, revamp and teach a class called Women, Gender, and Science, which is a past, present, future of women in STEM. That's where I use that document. Why so few? You should look that up. Just Google why so few online, and you will be amazed. If nothing else, read the chapter on implicit bias, and you'll realize why there are so few of us still, in STEM. So eventually, I created this poster, which was displayed at the 2012 Water for Food Conference. I got a lot of different, a lot of comments on it, a lot of discussion on it, and I'm out of time already, so thank you. I could have talked about that for a long time. Thank you very much.